According to the Madison database, in the year 1820, Australia was almost 4 times poorer than the Netherlands, more than 3 times poorer than Britain, and more than 2 times poorer than countries like America, Germany, France, Italy, or Spain. Today, according to the World Bank, Australia is richer than all those countries except America. As it sounds, the historical economic development of Australia is an incredible and remarkable thing. This country went from being a poor and underdeveloped penal colony of the British Empire to be one of the richest and most powerful countries today, and all that in just over 200 years. But how did Australia get such prosperity and wealth in the first place? To better understand Australian development, it is necessary to divide the economic history of Australia into 4 parts. The first part is the early colonization of Australia. In 1788, Britain began to colonize the island in order to use it as a penal colony. On many occasions, Britain neglected Australia for its remoteness, so that the Australian authorities were forced to develop a subsistence economy in order to depend as little as possible on Britain. All convicts serving their sentence were granted land to work in order to contribute to the colony and support them in their reintegration into society. In addition to this, it is remarkable that many convicts had knowledge in crafts and commerce, which was undoubtedly important in the construction of the basis for the Australian economy and society. The second part is the colonial economy and the birth of modern Australia. Since 1820, Britain, realizing the potential of Australia, stopped sending convicts and prioritized the migration of freemen. With the deepening of the Industrial Revolution in many European countries, the European industry began to need many raw materials and products that Australia, with a well-established subsistence economy, could perfectly provide. In the following years, Australia began to export a lot of wool, grains, meat, milk, and other farm products. Taking advantage of its great territorial extension, starting in 1830, Australia began to grant land to all migrants who worked it, something similar to what America did with the Homestead Act. In addition to this, in Victoria, southeast of Australia, huge gold deposits were discovered. This caused, on the one hand, a fairly accelerated growth of the Australian population as a result of European migration, and on the other hand, a large increase in wealth that subsequently caused a growth of the entire Australian economy. By the year 1870, Australia was one of the richest countries in the world, richer than all the countries in Europe and richer than America. In 1901, Australia wrote its own constitution and received great autonomy from Britain. From this moment, the third part began, the independence and the birth of the Australian industry. Until this moment, the Australian industry was very basic and was destined to supply the country with basic products such as clothes, canned food, or beer. The country was very rich, but this wealth was supported by agriculture and mining. Due to this, from 1901, Australia began to apply tariffs, taxes and regulations in order to stimulate the growth of its internal industry. In the next few years, Australia began to produce steel, automobiles, chemicals, electronic devices, and tools for electricity generation. Industrialization prevented Australia from stagnating and allowed it to continue to maintain its position as one of the richest countries of the world. During the Cold War, the fourth and last part occurred. The Australian liberalisation and opening. Since 1973, the post-war economic boom ended, which meant that the country could no longer continue to depend on the export of manufactures and agricultural products as it had been doing. Due to this, and to preserve the Australian economic prosperity, the Australian government began to remove tariffs, taxes, regulations, and other protectionist measures in order to open its economy to the world. It released the exchange rate of its currency, the Australian dollar, introduced social welfare policies, and carried out many privatizations with the purpose of reducing the role of the state in the economy and promoting competition. This caused that agriculture and industry were reduced in favor of services, but also the country managed to maintain a large part of its development. its wealth, and also important, the well-being of the Australian population. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe. Remember that you can leave your opinion in the comments and tell me if you want a video about a particular topic.